The crowd's jeers echoed through the dusty town square of Jerome, Arizona territory, as Lucinda Zeller stood trembling on the auction block, clutching her two young children to her sides. Blood trickled from a fresh cut on her lip, and her once beautiful face bore the marks of years of abuse at the hands of her now deceased husband. The year was 1878, and Lucinda had become property to be sold to pay off her late husband's substantial debts. $5 for the woman. Someone shouted from the crowd. She looked strong enough to work, despite the bruises. Lucinda held her 7-year-old daughter Emma close, while her 5-year-old son Jacob buried his face in her tattered skirt. The summer heat beat down mercilessly as the auctioneer, a rotund man with yellowed teeth, waved his hand for higher bids. $10, called another voice. $15, shouted a gruff miner whose reputation for cruelty was well known throughout Jerome. Lucinda's heart sank. She had prayed that someone kind might take pity on her situation, but as the bidding continued, she realized with growing horror that the men were discussing whether to separate her from her children. The boy could work the mines in a few years. The girl will fetch a good price when she's older. Tears threatened to spill from Lucinda's eyes, but she refused to give these vultures the satisfaction of seeing her break. She had endured 5 years of marriage to Malcolm Zeller, a man whose handsome face had hidden a monster. His death in a drunken brawl should have been her salvation, not this new nightmare. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Do I hear $20 for the woman? Children to be sold separately?" A hush fell over the crowd as a tall figure moved forward from the back. The stranger's face was partially hidden beneath the wide brim of a dusty black Stetson, but his shoulders were broad, his stance confident. He wore a simple cotton shirt, worn denim pants, and a gun belt that had clearly seen use. How much for all three? His voice was deep, calm, and carried an authority that made even the auctioneer pause. "Sir, we're selling them separately to maximize," I said, the man repeated, stepping closer and tilting his hat back to reveal intense blue eyes in a sun-weathered face. "How much for all three?" The crowd murmured. The cowboy wasn't known to them, a stranger passing through, perhaps, but there was something in his demeanor that commanded respect. $50 for the lot, the auctioneer finally said, clearly hoping to discourage him. Without hesitation, the stranger reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather pouch. He counted out the money deliberately, placing each coin on the auctioneer's table with a distinct click. "I'll take all three," he said firmly, his eyes never leaving Lucinda's face. Lucinda stared at her unexpected savior with a mixture of relief and fear. What did this man want with her and her children? Was he any better than the others? But as he approached the auction block and offered his hand to help her down, she saw something in his eyes that she hadn't seen in a man's gaze for a very long time: kindness. "Madam," he said quietly, "my name is Benjamin Garner. I have a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. You and your children will be safe there." Lucinda hesitated for only a moment before placing her trembling hand in his. "What choice did she have? Thank you, Mr. Garner," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Ben," he corrected gently. "Call me Ben." He helped her down from the platform, then reached up to lift Jacob and then Emma. The boy flinched when Ben's hands touched him, but Emma looked the stranger directly in the eyes. "Are you going to hurt my mama?" the little girl asked boldly. The crowd had gone silent, watching this unusual scene unfold. Ben knelt down to Emma's level, his expression serious. "No, little miss, I promise you that no one will hurt your mama again, not while I'm around." He stood and turned to face the onlookers, many of whom now averted their eyes, suddenly ashamed of their participation in this spectacle. Ben placed a protective hand lightly on Lucinda's back and guided her and her children toward a wagon parked at the edge of the square. "My horse is tied up there," he explained. "We'll get you settled in the wagon and head to the ranch before nightfall." As they walked away from the auction block, Lucinda felt the stares of the townspeople on her back. For 5 years they had ignored Malcolm's abuse, turned a blind eye to her bruises and broken bones. Not one had offered help when he was alive, nor after his death when the creditors came calling. Yet this stranger had stepped forward when no one else would. Why? She asked softly as they reached the wagon. Why would you do this for us? Ben's expression clouded as he helped Jacob into the wagon bed. Because it's what anyone decent should do, he replied simply. And because I know what it's like to be at the mercy of others with no say in your fate. He helped Emma up next, then turned to Lucinda. His hands were large but gentle as he assisted her onto the wagon seat. Rest easy, Mrs. Zeller, you're free now. As Ben untied his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, and prepared to leave town, Lucinda watched the buildings of Jerome grow smaller behind them. She had no idea what awaited her at this stranger's ranch, but for the first time in years, hope flickered in her heart. The journey to Ben's ranch took nearly 2 hours. The children had fallen asleep in the back of the wagon, exhausted by the day's events. Lucinda sat rigidly beside Ben, her hands folded tightly in her lap. You don't need to fear me, Ben said after they had traveled in silence for some time. I meant what I said. You and your children will be safe at my place. What will you expect of me? Lucinda asked, voicing the question that had been burning in her mind since the auction. Ben glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. Only what you're willing to give, he replied. I need help around the ranch, cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. There's a small cabin where you and your children can stay. It's not much, but it's clean and solid. And that's all. Lucinda couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. Ben's hands tightened on the reins momentarily before relaxing. Mrs. Zeller, I'm not your husband. I won't ever raise a hand to you or your children. I won't come to your cabin at night. You have my word on that. Lucinda studied his profile. Benjamin Garner appeared to be in his early 30s, with a strong jaw covered in several days' growth of beard. His hair, what she could see of it beneath his hat, was dark brown with touches of copper where the sun hit it. He wasn't classically handsome like Malcolm had been, but there was a steadiness to his features that she found reassuring. Thank you, she said softly. And, it's Miss, not Mrs. Malcolm, and I weren't legally married, though he called me his wife. Ben nodded, processing this information without comment. Those are your children, though? Yes, Lucinda affirmed. Emma is 7, Jacob is 5. Good kids, Ben said. The little girl's got spirit. A ghost of a smile touched Lucinda's lips. She gets that from me, I suppose. It's gotten her in trouble with, she stopped abruptly, unwilling to speak ill of the dead, even someone as deserving as Malcolm. With him, Ben finished for her. Lucinda nodded, turning to check on her sleeping children. Jacob's face was still swollen from a blow Malcolm had delivered the night before his death. The sight of it made her stomach clench with a familiar mixture of rage and helplessness. He won't hurt them again, she whispered, more to herself than to Ben. No, Ben agreed quietly, he won't. The wagon crested a small hill and Ben pointed ahead. There it is, Copper Creek Ranch. In the gathering dusk, Lucinda could make out the shape of a modest but well-maintained ranch house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. A small cabin stood a short distance from the main house, just as Ben had described. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, indicating someone was there. My foreman, Louis, and his wife, Margarita, live on the property, Ben explained, noting her questioning look. They help me run the place. Good people. Margarita will have dinner waiting. As they pulled up to the main house, the door opened, and a middle-aged Mexican woman stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of Lucinda and the children in the wagon, but she recovered quickly. Senor Ben, she called, you have brought guests. Ben jumped down from the wagon and went around to help Lucinda. This is Miss Lucinda Zeller and her children, Emma and Jacob. They'll be staying in the cabin and helping around the ranch. Margarita's dark eyes took in Lucinda's bruised face and thin frame, the sleeping children in the wagon. Understanding passed between the two women in an instant. The cabin is ready, Margarita said, her voice warm. I will bring food while you get settled. Ben gently woke the children and helped them down from the wagon. Jacob clung to his mother's skirt, regarding Ben and Margarita with wary eyes, but Emma straightened her shoulders and addressed Ben directly. Is this our new home? She asked. Ben nodded, a hint of a smile touching his lips. For as long as you and your mother want it to be." He led them to the cabin, carrying a small bundle that contained all of Lucinda's and the children's worldly possessions. The cabin was simple but clean, with a main room that served as both kitchen and living area and a small bedroom. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, already laid with wood for a fire. "It gets cold at night, even in summer," Ben explained, kneeling to light the fire. "There are extra blankets in that trunk." As the flames caught and illuminated the room, Lucinda took stock of their new surroundings. 2 beds in the bedroom, one larger, one smaller that could fit both children, a table with 4 chairs, a shelf with a few books, basic cooking utensils. It was more than she had expected. "Thank you, Mr. Garner," she said formally. "This is more than generous." Ben stood, brushing off his hands. "Ben," he reminded her, "and it's nothing, just a roof and walls." A knock at the door announced Margarita's arrival with a large tray of food, beans, tortillas, some kind of stew that smelled delicious. Lucinda's stomach growled audibly, reminding her that she hadn't eaten in over a day. "Eat," Margarita urged, setting the tray on the table. "The children, too." "Tomorrow we talk about everything else." Ben nodded in agreement. "I'll leave you to get settled. In the morning, I'll show you around the ranch." After they had gone, Lucinda served her children the first proper meal they'd had in weeks. As they ate hungrily, she tried to make sense of the day's events. That morning, she had been facing separation from her children and a future of servitude or worse. Tonight, they were safe, fed, and together. It seemed too good to be true. And in Lucinda's experience, when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. Yet something about Benjamin Garner's steady gaze made her want to believe him when he promised safety. After the children were asleep, Lucinda sat by the fire, watching the flames dance. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder about the future, not just tomorrow or next week, but beyond. Could they really stay here? Could she trust this stranger's kindness? She had no answers, only questions and the faint, unfamiliar feeling of hope that had taken root in her heart. Dawn came early to Copper Creek Ranch. Lucinda, who had slept fitfully in the unfamiliar bed, rose with the first light to find that someone had left a basket of fresh eggs, milk, and bread on the cabin's doorstep. A note in a firm, masculine hand read simply, "Take your time, I'll be at the barn when you're ready, B." The gesture touched her in a way she couldn't quite articulate. She prepared a simple breakfast for her children, marveling at having fresh food to serve them. Emma helped set the table, her eyes brighter than Lucinda had seen them in months. "I like it here, Mama," she declared. "Mr. Ben seems nice." "He does," Lucinda agreed cautiously. "But we must remember that we don't know him yet." Jacob, still sleepy-eyed, picked at his food. "Are we staying forever?" he asked. Lucinda smoothed his dark hair. "I don't know, sweetheart, for now at least." After breakfast, Lucinda washed the children's faces and tried to make them look presentable in their worn clothing. She did the same for herself, wincing as she dabbed at her split lip. The bruise on her cheekbone had turned a sickly yellowish purple, but there was nothing to be done about that. Together, they made their way to the barn. The morning was already warm, promising another scorching day. The ranch looked even better in daylight, not large or grand, but well-maintained, with healthy livestock in the corrals and neat fencing. They found Ben in the barn, repairing a piece of tack. He looked up as they entered, his face breaking into a genuine smile at the sight of the children. "Good morning," he greeted them, setting aside his work. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, thank you," Lucinda replied formally, "and thank you for the breakfast provisions." "That was Margarita's doing," Ben admitted. "She's taken it upon herself to make sure you're looked after." Emma stepped forward, her curiosity overcoming her shyness. "Do you have horses?" she asked eagerly. Ben nodded, his expression softening as he addressed the little girl. "I do." "Would you like to see them?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. Even Jacob perked up at this suggestion. "This way," Ben led them deeper into the barn, where several horses stood in stalls. The magnificent chestnut stallion Lucinda had seen the day before whickered softly as Ben approached. "This is Thunder," Ben said, stroking the horse's nose. "He's been with me for 6 years now." "He's beautiful," Emma breathed, reaching out a tentative hand. "Careful," Ben cautioned. "He's particular about who touches him." To everyone's surprise, Thunder lowered his head and allowed Emma to pat his velvety nose. Ben's eyebrows rose. "Well, I'll be," he murmured. "He must see something special in you, Miss Emma." The little girl beamed at this praise, and Lucinda felt a surge of gratitude toward Ben for his kindness to her daughter. "Would you like to see the rest of the ranch?" Ben asked, addressing all three of them. Jacob, who had been hanging back, finally spoke. "Do you have cows?" Ben nodded solemnly. "I do indeed, about 60 head of cattle. Would you like to see them too?" The boy nodded, taking a small step away from his mother's side. The tour of the ranch took most of the morning. Ben showed them the cattle, the small vegetable garden that Margarita tended, the chicken coop, and the creek that gave the ranch its name. Throughout, he was patient with the children's questions and respectful of Lucinda's quiet reserve. As they walked back toward the main house, Ben cleared his throat. "Miss Zeller, I want to be clear about your situation here," he began. "You're not indentured to me. The money I paid yesterday wasn't buying you, it was freeing you. You can leave any time you wish." Lucinda stopped walking, stunned by his words. "But where would we go? We have nothing." Ben shrugged. "You have a safe place here for as long as you need it. In return, if you're willing to help with cooking and housekeeping, I'd be grateful. Margarita does her best, but she's getting older and this place could use a woman's touch." He paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "What I mean is, I'm offering you employment, not ownership. You'll be paid fair wages that you can save if you want to move on eventually." Lucinda stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. Finding none, she felt tears prick at her eyes. "Why?" she asked for the second time. "Why would you do this for strangers?" Ben looked away, his gaze settling on the distant mountains. "Let's just say I know what it's like to be treated as property rather than a person." Before Lucinda could ask what he meant, Emma tugged at her skirt. "Mama, can we stay?" the little girl pleaded. "Please." Lucinda looked down at her daughter's hopeful face, then at Jacob, who was watching a butterfly with the first sign of childlike interest she'd seen in months. Finally, she looked at Ben, this strange, kind man who had offered them salvation when they needed it most. "Yes," she said softly. "We'll stay, and I'll work hard to earn our keep, Mr. Garner." "Ben," he corrected with a slight smile, "and I never doubted that you would." The weeks passed, and summer gave way to early autumn. Lucinda fell into a routine at Copper Creek Ranch, rising early to prepare breakfast for Ben and his ranch hands, tending to the housekeeping of the main house, and preparing the midday and evening meals. The work was hard but satisfying, and for the first time in years she felt useful and appreciated. Ben was true to his word. He never raised his voice to her or the children, never made inappropriate demands, and paid her fair wages each week. He was often gone during the day, working with the cattle or tending to ranch business, but in the evenings, he would sometimes stop by the cabin to check on them or bring small gifts, a jar of honey from town, a book for Emma who was learning to read, a small wooden horse he had carved for Jacob. The children bloomed under the peaceful routine of ranch life. Emma, always the more outgoing of the two, became Ben's shadow whenever he allowed it, following him around and asking endless questions about the ranch. Jacob remained more reserved, but even he began to relax, especially around Louis, who taught him to collect eggs from the chicken coop without frightening the hens. Lucinda found an unexpected ally in Margarita, who shared her knowledge of cooking, gardening, and the simple home remedies she had learned from her mother. The older woman never asked about Lucinda's past, but her gentle acceptance provided a safe space for Lucinda to gradually heal. As for Ben, he remained something of an enigma. He was unfailingly kind but maintained a certain distance, as if wary of intruding on Lucinda's space. She learned bits and pieces about him: that he had come to Arizona Territory 10 years earlier, that he had built Copper Creek Ranch from nearly nothing, that he was respected in Jerome for his fair dealings and quiet generosity. But of his life before Arizona, he said little. One evening in late September, after the children were asleep, Lucinda sat on the small porch of the cabin, enjoying the cool night air. The sound of footsteps made her look up to see Ben approaching, a lantern in hand. "Evening, Miss Zeller," he greeted her, his voice low. Mind if I join you? Please do, she replied, gesturing to the bench beside her. And it's Lucinda, remember? A smile touched his lips as he sat down, placing the lantern between them. Lucinda, he acknowledged. How are you settling in? Very well, she said honestly. The children are happier than I've seen them in. Well, ever, and I'm grateful for the work. You've done wonders with the place, Ben told her. The house hasn't been this clean or comfortable since. Well, ever, he echoed her words with a smile. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the night sounds: crickets, the distant howl of a coyote, the soft nickering of horses in the barn. May I ask you something? Lucinda ventured finally. Ben nodded. Of course. That day in town. You said you knew what it was like to be treated as property. What did you mean? The question had been burning in her mind for weeks, but she hadn't found the right moment to ask. Now, in the soft glow of the lantern light, Ben's face took on a distant expression. I was born in Georgia, he began after a long pause. My father owned a small plantation, nothing grand, just enough to keep us comfortable, and slaves. He owned people. The disgust in his voice was evident. I was raised with it, taught it was the natural order of things. But even as a boy, it never sat right with me. He paused, staring into the darkness beyond the circle of lantern light. When the war came, I was 17. Too young to fight at first, but by 63, they were taking anyone who could hold a rifle. My father expected me to fight for the Confederacy to defend our way of life. Instead, I ran north and joined the Union Army. Lucinda listened, fascinated by this glimpse into Ben's past. My father disowned me, of course, said I was dead to him, and maybe I was. The boy who left Georgia died somewhere on those battlefields. Ben's voice had grown hoarse. After the war, I couldn't go home, didn't want to. I drifted west, worked cattle drives, saved every penny until I could buy this place. And your family, Lucinda asked softly, did you ever reconcile? Ben shook his head. My father died while I was still in the army, my mother a few years later. I had a younger sister, but I lost track of her after the war. Regret tinged his words. So when I saw you and your children on that auction block, being treated like cattle. He trailed off, then met her eyes directly. I couldn't stand by and watch it happen, not again. Lucinda reached out impulsively and placed her hand on his. Thank you, she said simply. You saved us. Ben looked down at their hands, then gently turned his palm up to clasp her fingers. You're saving yourselves, he corrected. I just provided the opportunity. In that moment, with the night wrapping around them like a blanket and Ben's hand warm against hers, Lucinda felt something shift inside her, a wall beginning to crumble, a door starting to open. It frightened her, this feeling, but it also filled her with a strange exhilaration. Ben must have sensed her confusion, for he released her hand and stood up. It's getting late, he said. I should let you rest. Lucinda stood as well, suddenly reluctant for him to leave. Thank you for sharing your story with me, he nodded, picking up the lantern. Good night, Lucinda. Good night, Ben. She watched him walk back toward the main house, his tall figure gradually swallowed by the darkness. Only when he was out of sight did she realize she was trembling, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar stirring of feelings she had thought long dead. October brought cooler temperatures and the bustle of preparations for winter. Lucinda threw herself into the work of preserving the garden's bounty, learning from Margarita how to can vegetables and fruits, how to dry herbs, how to smoke meat to last through the colder months. Ben was often away during this time, taking cattle to market in Prescott, returning with supplies and occasional treats for the children: peppermint sticks, a new hair ribbon for Emma, a small pocket knife for Jacob that he solemnly promised to use carefully. The day after Ben returned from one such trip, a heavy rainstorm hit the ranch. Lucinda and the children were confined to the cabin, listening to the rain pound on the roof. By mid-afternoon, Emma was restless and Jacob was fidgeting with boredom. Why don't we go to the main house? Lucinda suggested. I need to start dinner anyway, and perhaps Mr. Ben has some chores you can help with inside. The idea brightened the children's mood immediately. They donned their coats and made a dash through the rain to the main house, arriving damp but laughing. They found Ben in the main room, seated at a table covered with papers, ledgers, receipts, letters. He looked up as they entered, his tired expression transforming into a warm smile. "Well, this is a pleasant surprise," he greeted them. "Come in out of that rain." "We came to help with dinner," Emma announced importantly. "And Jacob is bored." Ben chuckled at her directness. "Is that so? Well, I could use some help myself. These accounts are giving me a headache." Lucinda hung their wet coats by the fire to dry. "Don't let us interrupt your work," she said. "We'll be quiet." "Nonsense," Ben replied, pushing the papers aside. "I could use a break. Besides, I have something for the children." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a checkerboard. "Do either of you know how to play?" Jacob shook his head, but Emma nodded eagerly. "Papa, I mean, Malcolm had a set, but he never let us touch it." A shadow crossed Ben's face at the mention of Malcolm, but he quickly recovered. "Well, I'm letting you touch this one. In fact, it's yours now, both of you." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Our own checkerboard?" "Really," Ben confirmed. "Now, who wants to play first?" "Jacob should," Emma said, surprising everyone with her generosity. "He's never played before." While Ben set up the board and began explaining the rules to Jacob, Lucinda moved to the kitchen to start dinner. As she worked, she could hear Ben's patient voice guiding Jacob through the game, Emma's occasional suggestions, and even Jacob's soft laughter when he managed to jump one of Ben's pieces. The scene stirred something deep within her, a longing for normalcy, for the kind of family life she had dreamed of as a young girl before Malcolm had swept into her life with his charming smile and hidden cruelty. Watching Ben with her children, seeing his natural ease and genuine enjoyment of their company, made her heart ache with both gratitude and a more complicated emotion she wasn't ready to name. By the time dinner was ready, the rain had stopped and slanted sunlight poured through the windows. Louis and Margarita joined them, and the meal became a lively affair, with stories and laughter flowing freely around the table. Afterward, when the dishes were cleared and the children were playing with a set of wooden animals Louis had carved, Ben approached Lucinda as she dried the last plate. "They're good children," he observed quietly. "You've done well by them, despite everything." Lucinda placed the plate on the shelf, taking time to compose herself before responding. "I tried to protect them from the worst of it," she said softly, "but children see more than we think." Ben nodded, his eyes on Emma and Jacob as they played by the fire. "They're resilient, and they trust you." He paused, then added, "They're beginning to trust me too, I think." "They are," Lucinda agreed. "Especially Emma, she talks about you constantly." A pleased smile touched Ben's lips. "Does she? And Jacob?" He's more cautious by nature, and Malcolm was harder on him than on Emma. Lucinda's hands tightened on the dish towel. "But he's warming to you. That game of checkers meant a lot to him." Ben's expression darkened. "Did that bastard, forgive my language, did he hurt the boy badly?" Lucinda closed her eyes briefly, unwilling memories surfacing. "Yes," she admitted. "He said Jacob needed to be toughened up, that he was too soft, too much like me." Ben's jaw clenched, a muscle working in his cheek. "Some men," he said finally, "don't deserve the name." "No," Lucinda agreed. "They don't." Their eyes met in shared understanding, and in that moment, Lucinda felt a connection to Ben that transcended gratitude or friendship. He saw her, truly saw her, and the pain she had endured. There was no pity in his gaze, only a deep respect that made her stand taller. "Will you tell me about him someday?" Ben asked quietly. "When you're ready," Lucinda nodded slowly. "Yes, someday." The moment was broken by Emma's excited call. "Mama, Mr. Ben, look. It stopped raining and there's a rainbow." They moved to the window where the children stood, and sure enough, a brilliant rainbow arched across the sky, its colors vibrant against the retreating storm clouds. "Make a wish, Mama," Emma urged. "Margarita says rainbows are lucky." Lucinda smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. "What should I wish for?" Emma considered this seriously. "Wish that we can stay here forever," she decided. Lucinda's eyes met Ben's over the children's heads. Something unspoken passed between them, a question, a possibility, a future neither had dared imagine. "That," Ben said softly, "is something I might wish for too." November brought the first frost, painting the ranch in silver each morning. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm for Lucinda and the children. Emma had started lessons with Margarita, who had once been a schoolteacher in Mexico. Jacob spent more time with Louis, learning to care for the animals and helping with small chores around the ranch. Both children were flourishing, their eyes clear and bright, their laughter coming more easily each day. Lucinda, too, had changed. The constant fear that had been her companion for so many years had gradually receded, replaced by a cautious contentment. Her body had filled out with regular meals and less strenuous work. The bruises had long since faded, and when she caught her reflection in the mirror, she sometimes hardly recognized the healthy, almost pretty woman who looked back at her. Ben noticed the changes too. Lucinda often caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, his eyes warm with an admiration he never expressed aloud. True to his word, he maintained a respectful distance, never presuming, never pushing. But sometimes in the evening, when they sat together after the children were asleep, talking about the day's events or plans for the ranch, she felt a tension between them that had nothing to do with fear. One such evening, as they sat by the fire in the main house going over supplies for the winter, Ben cleared his throat nervously. "Lucinda," he began, setting aside the list they had been working on, "there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you." She looked up, her pencil poised over the paper. "Yes," Ben ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "Christmas is coming in a few weeks," he said, "and I was thinking, well, Emma and Jacob probably haven't had much to celebrate in recent years." Lucinda's throat tightened at the thought of past Christmases, Malcolm drunk and angry, the children hiding in their room, any meager gifts she managed to provide often broken in fits of rage. "No," she acknowledged, "they haven't." "I'd like to change that," Ben continued. "I thought we might go into Prescott. The town puts on quite a celebration. There's a tree lighting, caroling, even a small fair, and the shops, well, the children could perhaps choose gifts." Lucinda stared at him, touched by his thoughtfulness. "That sounds wonderful, Ben." "The children would love it." A smile lit his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Good, it's settled then. We'll go next week." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "And there's one more thing, this is for you." Lucinda took the pouch, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened it. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small turquoise pendant. "Ben," she breathed, lifting it from the pouch. "It's beautiful, but I can't please," he interrupted gently. "It's not. I'm not expecting anything in return. I just saw it in Prescott and thought it would suit you. Consider it an early Christmas gift if you like." Lucinda held the necklace, running her thumb over the smooth stone. It had been years since anyone had given her something simply for the pleasure of it, with no expectations attached. "Thank you," she said finally, looking up to meet his gaze. "I'll treasure it." Ben's eyes softened. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the necklace. Lucinda nodded and turned, lifting her hair so he could fasten the clasp around her neck. His fingers were warm against her skin, and she felt a shiver run through her that had nothing to do with the evening chill. When she turned back to face him, Ben's breath caught audibly. "It suits you," he said, his voice rougher than usual, "just as I thought it would." Lucinda touched the pendant where it rested in the hollow of her throat. "No one has given me jewelry since." She trailed off, unwilling to mention Malcolm in this moment. "Since before," Ben supplied, understanding immediately. "I know your past experiences make it hard to trust men, Lucinda. I know you have every reason to be cautious, but I hope you know that my intentions are honorable." "I do know that," she assured him. "You've shown me nothing but respect and kindness." Ben nodded, but something in his expression told her there was more he wanted to say. Instead, he stood and moved to stoke the fire. "It's getting late," he observed. "I should walk you back to the cabin." Outside, the night was crisp and clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. They walked in silence, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. When they reached the cabin, Lucinda paused at the door. "Ben," she said softly, "I haven't thanked you properly. Not just for the necklace, but for everything. For saving us that day in Jerome, for giving us a home, for treating the children with such kindness." Ben shook his head. "You don't need to thank me, Lucinda. Having you and the children here, it's changed everything, for the better." He took a step closer, and in the moonlight, she could see the conflict in his eyes, desire warring with respect, longing with restraint. "Good night, Lucinda," he said finally, his voice husky. Before he could turn away, she reached up and placed a gentle hand on his cheek. It was the first time she had deliberately touched him, and she felt him go still beneath her fingers. "Good night, Ben," she whispered, then leaned forward and pressed her lips to his cheek in a whisper of a kiss. She stepped back quickly, her heart pounding, and slipped inside the cabin before he could respond. Through the window, she watched him stand motionless for a long moment, his hand rising to touch the spot where her lips had been. Then he turned and walked back toward the main house, his stride uneven as if he had been shaken to his core. Lucinda touched the turquoise pendant, feeling the smooth stone warm against her skin. She was trembling, not with fear but with the realization that she was falling in love with Benjamin Garner. The thought terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. The trip to Prescott for Christmas shopping was a grand adventure for the children. Emma and Jacob stared wide-eyed at the bustling streets, the decorated shop windows, the towering Christmas tree in the town square. Ben had given each child a small sum to spend on gifts, and they took this responsibility with utmost seriousness, whispering together as they peered into shop windows. Lucinda, too, felt a childlike wonder at the festive atmosphere. It had been so long since she had experienced Christmas as a celebration rather than something to be endured. The colored lights, the carolers on street corners, the scent of pine and cinnamon in the air, all of it filled her with a joy she had nearly forgotten. Ben watched her with evident pleasure as she admired a display of Christmas ornaments, her face lit with delight. "You look happy," he observed. Lucinda turned to him, smiling. "I am happy," she admitted, "happier than I've been in a very long time." Something passed through Ben's eyes, a flash of emotion quickly controlled. "Good," he said simply, "that's all I want." After the children had made their mysterious purchases, carefully hidden in brown paper packages, Ben suggested lunch at the hotel dining room, a treat that made Emma's eyes widen with excitement and even Jacob's smile with anticipation. Over a meal far more elaborate than anything they normally ate at the ranch, Ben entertained the children with stories of his early days in Arizona Territory. There were no fancy hotels like this back then, he told them. "Many nights I slept under the stars with just my horse and a campfire for company. Weren't you scared?" Jacob asked, forgetting his usual shyness. Ben considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," he acknowledged. But the stars were good company, and thunder he was just a colt, then kept watch. "I want to sleep under the stars someday," Emma declared. Ben chuckled. "Maybe in the spring we can camp out in the meadow by the creek," he suggested, then glanced at Lucinda. "If your mother approves, of course." "Please, Mama," Emma pleaded. Lucinda smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. "We'll see when the weather warms up." After lunch, as they prepared to return to the ranch, Ben pulled Lucinda aside. "There's one more stop I'd like to make," he said quietly. "Would you mind waiting with the children for a few minutes?" Curious, Lucinda agreed. Ben disappeared down the street, returning 15 minutes later with a mysterious smile and no explanation for his absence. The journey back to the ranch was filled with excited chatter from the children about everything they had seen and done in Prescott. By the time they arrived home, both Emma and Jacob were drowsy from the excitement and the long ride. "I'll get them settled," Lucinda told Ben as he helped her down from the wagon. "Thank you for today, it was wonderful." Ben's hand lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary. "I enjoyed it too," he said softly, "more than I can say." Christmas Eve arrived with a light dusting of snow, unusual for their part of Arizona, but magical nonetheless. Lucinda spent the day cooking with Margarita, preparing a feast while the children vibrated with excitement, watching out the window for any sign of Santa Claus, despite the fact that it was still daylight. Ben had disappeared into the barn early in the morning, emerging only for meals and being uncharacteristically secretive about his activities. When Lucinda questioned him, he merely smiled and said, "You'll see tonight." After a celebratory dinner with Louis and Margarita joining them in the main house, Ben announced that it was time for a surprise. He led them all to the barn, which had been transformed. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the space. In one corner stood a small pine tree, decorated with paper stars that Emma and Jacob had made with Margarita, strings of dried berries, and a few glass ornaments that must have come from Prescott. Beneath the tree were packages wrapped in colorful paper more than Lucinda had expected. The children gasped in delight, but Ben held up a hand before they could rush forward. "First," he said solemnly, "I believe Louis has a tradition to share." Louis stepped forward with his guitar and began to play a traditional Mexican Christmas song. His deep voice filled the barn, joined soon by Margarita's higher one. The music was hauntingly beautiful, speaking of hope and love and the miracle of Christmas. When the song ended, Ben gestured to the tree. "Now, I think it's time for presents." What followed was a joyous chaos of torn paper and exclamations of delight. Emma received a doll with real porcelain face and hands, a new dress, and a book of fairy tales. Jacob was given a wooden train set, a new coat, and a small toolbox with real tools sized for his small hands. Lucinda watched, tears filling her eyes as her children experienced their first real Christmas celebration. When they had opened their gifts, Emma suddenly remembered the packages they had purchased in Prescott. "We got presents for everyone too," she announced proudly. The children had chosen with care: a colorful scarf for Margarita, tobacco for Louis, and for Ben, a leather bookmark with his initials stamped into it. "Jacob picked it," Emma explained as Ben admired the gift, "because you like to read at night." Ben's eyes were suspiciously bright as he thanked the boy. "It's perfect," he said. "I'll use it every day." Finally, Emma handed Lucinda a small package. "This is from me and Jacob," she said solemnly. Inside was a small wooden frame holding a drawing the children had made together, a simple but touching depiction of their new family. Lucinda, Emma, Jacob, and Ben, all standing in front of a house with smoke curling from the chimney. "It's us," Emma explained unnecessarily. "At our home." Lucinda hugged her children close, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "There's one more gift," Ben said after a moment, his voice gentle. He reached behind the tree and brought out a large package which he placed in front of Lucinda. "This is for all three of you, but mostly for you, Lucinda." Curious, she unwrapped the package to reveal a beautiful quilt in shades of blue, green, and purple colors reminiscent of the turquoise pendant she wore around her neck. The pattern was intricate, the stitching expert. "Ben," she breathed, "it's exquisite." "I commissioned it from Mrs. Patterson in Prescott," he explained. "She's known for her quilts. I thought, well, winters get cold and the cabin can be drafty." Lucinda ran her hand over the soft fabric, deeply touched by his thoughtfulness. "It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received," she told him honestly. The evening concluded with hot chocolate and cookies by the fire in the main house. One by one, the participants drifted off, first the children, carried to the cabin by Ben and Louis, then Margarita and Louis to their own quarters. Finally, only Ben and Lucinda remained, sitting side by side on the sofa, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. "Thank you," Lucinda said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "for giving us a real Christmas. The children will remember this their whole lives." Ben turned to look at her, the firelight playing across his features. "You deserve so much more than I can give you, Lucinda," he said, his voice low and intense. "All three of you do," she shook her head. "You've given us everything that matters: safety, respect, kindness, a home." She hesitated, then added, "hope." Ben's hand found hers on the sofa between them, his fingers warm as they entwined with hers. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, "something I've been holding back." Lucinda tensed slightly, years of conditioning making her brace for bad news. Ben must have felt her reaction, for he squeezed her hand reassuringly. "It's nothing bad," he promised. "At least I hope you won't think so." He took a deep breath as if gathering his courage. "Lucinda, I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, simple yet profound. Lucinda stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. "You don't have to say anything," Ben continued quickly. I don't expect anything from you. I know you've been hurt, betrayed by the very person who should have protected you. I know trust comes hard for you now. But I wanted you to know how I feel, how I've felt for some time now." Lucinda found her voice at last. "Ben," she said softly, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he repeated. "Just know that whatever happens, however you feel, you and the children have a home here for as long as you want it. No conditions, no expectations." He began to withdraw his hand, but Lucinda tightened her grip. "Wait," she whispered. "Please." Ben stilled, his eyes searching hers in the firelight. "I'm afraid," Lucinda admitted, her voice barely audible. "Not of you, but of what I feel for you. I never thought I could trust a man again, never thought I could." She swallowed hard. "Never thought I could love again. But with you, it's different. Everything is different." Hope dawned in Ben's eyes. "Lucinda," he breathed, "are you saying—" "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she confessed, "and it terrifies me." Ben's free hand came up to cup her cheek gently. "We can take all the time you need," he promised. "There's no rush, no pressure, just know that my feelings won't change." Lucinda leaned into his touch, feeling a sense of rightness that overrode her fear. "Kiss me," she whispered, "please." Ben hesitated only a moment before leaning forward to press his lips to hers in a kiss so gentle, so tender that tears sprang to Lucinda's eyes. It was nothing like Malcolm's demanding, possessive kisses. This was an offering, not a taking a promise made without words. When they parted, Ben rested his forehead against hers. "I will never hurt you," he vowed. "I will never raise a hand to you or the children. I will spend every day trying to be worthy of your trust." Lucinda's heart swelled with an emotion too big for her chest, too powerful for words. Instead of speaking, she kissed him again, pouring all her feelings into the gesture, her gratitude, her hope, her tentative but growing love. Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing Copper Creek Ranch in white. Inside, by the warmth of the fire, a new beginning was taking shape, fragile yet strong, like the first green shoot breaking through soil after a long winter. Spring came early to Copper Creek Ranch. The meadows bloomed with wildflowers, the creek ran full with melted snow from the distant mountains, and the cattle grew fat on fresh grass. The changes in the landscape mirrored the changes in Lucinda's life: renewal, growth, and an unexpected blossoming. In the months since Christmas, her relationship with Ben had deepened gradually, like a river finding its natural course. He courted her with old-fashioned courtesy, respecting her boundaries, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. They shared meals, conversations, and increasingly tender moments together, but Ben still returned to the main house each night, leaving Lucinda and the children in the cabin. The children had flourished under the arrangement. Emma had declared Ben her very best friend after he taught her to ride a gentle mare named Daisy. Jacob, initially more wary, had finally warmed to Ben after the man spent countless patient hours showing him how to whittle wood and repair simple tools. One warm evening in early May, Ben invited Lucinda for a walk after dinner. The children were engrossed in a game with Margarita, who winked knowingly at Lucinda as she and Ben slipped outside. They walked hand in hand toward the creek, where a small wooden bench had appeared mysteriously the week before another of Ben's thoughtful gestures. The setting sun painted the landscape in gold and rose, and the air was sweet with the scent of wildflowers. "I've been thinking," Ben began as they sat on the bench, his voice unusually serious. "That sounds dangerous," Lucinda teased, though her heart had begun to beat faster at his tone. Ben smiled, but his eyes remained intent. "Lucinda, you and the children have been here for almost a year now." "The best year of my life," she said softly. Ben took both her hands in his. "Mine too, and I've been thinking about the future, our future." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Lucinda. I love Emma and Jacob as if they were my own. I want to make it official if you'll have me. I want to marry you." Even though she had begun to suspect this was coming, Lucinda's breath caught. "Ben, before you answer," he continued quickly, "I want you to know that this isn't about possession or control. Marriage to me would be a partnership. You would still have your independence, your own money. The children would never be subjected to harsh discipline or fear. And if you need more time, I understand. I'll wait as long as necessary. Lucinda looked into his earnest face, this man who had saved her in so many ways, who had shown her what love truly meant, not possession or power, but respect, kindness, and unwavering support. She thought of the past year, how he had rebuilt her trust piece by piece, how he had never once broken a promise or raised his voice in anger. "Ben Garner," she said, her voice steady despite the tears that threatened, "I would be honored to be your wife." Joy transformed Ben's face. "You mean it?" "Truly," Lucinda nodded, smiling through tears. "Truly, I love you, Ben, and so do the children." Ben pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that still respected her boundaries. When they broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'll spend every day making sure you never regret this decision," he promised. "I know you will," Lucinda replied. "That's why I can make it without fear." They sat together as twilight deepened into night, planning their future. They would marry in June when the wildflowers were at their peak. Emma would carry flowers and Jacob would be the ring bearer. Louis would stand as Ben's best man, and Margarita would help Lucinda prepare for her special day. "What about the children's last name?" Ben asked. "Would you want them to take mine?" Lucinda considered this. "I think they should have a choice," she said finally. "Malcolm never legally recognized them as his, so legally they're already Zellers, not Zellers, but they're old enough to have a say in whether they become Garners." Ben nodded, clearly touched by her thoughtfulness. "We'll ask them together," he agreed, "but first, we need to tell them about the wedding." The children's reaction to the news the next morning exceeded even Lucinda's expectations. Emma squealed with delight and threw herself into Ben's arms, while Jacob's face broke into the widest smile Lucinda had seen yet. "Does this mean you'll be our pa now?" Jacob asked, his voice serious despite his smile. Ben knelt to the boy's level, his own expression equally serious. "If you'll have me, Jacob, yes, I would be honored to be your pa." Jacob considered this, then nodded solemnly. "I would like that," he decided. "But I don't want to call you pa yet. Is that all right?" "Of course it's all right," Ben assured him. "You can call me Ben for as long as you like." "And if you never want to call me pa, that's all right too." Emma, not to be outdone, inserted herself into the conversation. "I want to call you pa right away," she announced, "and I want to be a flower girl at the wedding. Can I, Mama, please?" Lucinda laughed, her heart full to bursting with love for her little family. "Yes, Emma, you can be our flower girl." The wedding preparations became a joyful focus for everyone at Copper Creek Ranch. Ben rode into Prescott and returned with white fabric for a wedding dress, which Margarita and Lucinda transformed into a simple but elegant gown. He also brought back a gold band for Lucinda, and to her surprise, smaller rings for Emma and Jacob. "They're family rings," he explained. "To show that I'm not just marrying you, Lucinda, I'm committing to all three of you." The gesture moved her deeply, especially when she saw how proudly the children wore their rings on chains around their necks, not yet ready to wear them on their small fingers, but treasuring them nonetheless. Word of the upcoming marriage spread through the surrounding ranches and into Jerome. To Lucinda's surprise, many of the same townspeople who had watched her auction with indifference now sent gifts and well wishes. Perhaps they were motivated by guilt, or perhaps by genuine happiness for the couple. Either way, Lucinda chose to accept their goodwill with grace. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect. Wildflowers nodded in a gentle breeze as a small gathering assembled by the Creek Louis and Margarita, a few neighboring ranchers and their wives, and the circuit riding preacher who had arrived the previous evening. Ben stood waiting, more handsome than Lucinda had ever seen him in a new black suit, his hair freshly trimmed, his face clean-shaven. The look in his eyes as Lucinda approached on Louis's arm, Emma scattering flower petals before them and Jacob following solemnly with the rings, was one she would remember all her days, a look of wonder, joy, and infinite love. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. When the preacher asked who gave this woman in marriage, Louis responded, "She gives herself with the blessing of her friends." It was a statement that acknowledged Lucinda's independence and choice, just as she and Ben had planned. The vows they exchanged were traditional but with one significant addition. After promising to love, honor, and cherish one another, Ben knelt down to address Emma and Jacob directly. "I make these promises to you as well," he told them, his voice thick with emotion. "To love and protect you, to guide but not control you, to respect your thoughts and feelings, to provide for your needs, and to be the kind of father you deserve. This I vow before God and these witnesses." There wasn't a dry eye in the gathering as Ben placed the family rings on the children's fingers where they had decided they wanted to wear them after all, and then the gold band on Lucinda's finger. "With this ring I thee wed," he said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. "With my body I thee worship, with all my worldly goods I thee endow." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ben kissed Lucinda with a tender passion that made her heart soar. Then he gathered Emma and Jacob into their embrace, the four of them holding each other in a circle of love that had seemed impossible just 1 year ago. The celebration that followed was joyous, a feast prepared by Margarita, music provided by Louis and 2 neighboring ranchers, dancing under the open sky until the stars came out. When night fell, lanterns were lit around the meadow, casting a magical glow over the proceedings. Eventually, the guests departed, and Louis and Margarita took charge of the children, who were to spend the night in the main house while Ben and Lucinda had the cabin to themselves. "Are you happy, Mrs. Garner?" Ben asked as they walked hand in hand toward the cabin, now their home. Lucinda squeezed his hand. "Happier than I ever thought possible, Mr. Garner." At the door, Ben paused. "I want you to know that I understand this night might be difficult for you given your past. We can take things as slowly as you need." Lucinda reached up to touch his face, deeply moved by his consideration. "Malcolm took so much from me," she said softly. "My dignity, my self-worth, years of my life, but he never took my capacity to love. You helped me find that again, Ben, and I'm not afraid not with you." Ben's eyes darkened with desire, but he kept his touch gentle as he lifted her into his arms and carried her across the threshold. Inside, the cabin had been transformed with fresh flowers and candles, the new quilt spread across the bed. Another of Margarita's touches, Lucinda guessed, feeling a rush of gratitude for the woman's friendship. What followed was a wedding night that healed old wounds and created new bonds. Ben's lovemaking was everything Malcolm's had never been: tender, respectful, focused on her pleasure as much as his own. For the first time, Lucinda understood what physical love was meant to be, not a taking but a giving, not a possession but a communion. Afterward, lying in Ben's arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Lucinda felt a sense of peace she had never known before. "I love you, Ben Garner," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his chest, his arms tightened around her. "And I love you, Lucinda Garner. Always." Epilogue: 5 years later, the sound of children's laughter floated across Copper Creek Ranch on a warm summer evening. Emma, now 12, sat cross-legged on the porch of the expanded main house, reading a story to her younger siblings. 3-year-old twins Thomas and Sarah, and 1-year-old Rebecca, who gurgled happily in her big sister's lap. Jacob, 10 years old and growing tall, had just returned from helping Ben with the evening chores. No longer the timid, frightened boy he had once been, he walked with confidence, chattering excitedly about the new foal born in the barn that morning. Lucinda watched from the kitchen window as her family gathered on the porch. Ben, dusty from the day's work but smiling broadly, ruffled Jacob's hair and swooped down to scoop up Thomas, who squealed with delight at his father's attention. Family. The word still filled Lucinda with wonder. From the darkest days of her life had come this miracle: a husband who treated her as an equal partner, children who felt safe and loved, a home filled with laughter instead of fear. Ben looked up and caught her eye through the window. Even after 5 years of marriage, his smile still made her heart beat faster. He gestured for her to join them, and Lucinda gladly abandoned the dinner preparations to step outside into the golden evening light. "Mama," Sarah exclaimed, running to wrap her arms around Lucinda's legs. "Papa says we can sleep outside tonight, in a tent." "Does he now?" Lucinda asked, raising an eyebrow at Ben, who had the grace to look sheepish. I might have mentioned the possibility, he admitted, but only if Mama agrees. Lucinda pretended to consider it seriously, though she already knew her answer. These moments, these simple family pleasures were precisely what made their life together so precious. I suppose we could, she said finally, laughing as Sarah whooped with joy. But only if Jacob and Emma help set up the tent. I will, Jacob volunteered immediately. I know how now, Pa showed me last time. The slip between names was common for Jacob, who alternated between calling Ben by his first name and Pa, depending on his mood. Ben never corrected him, understanding that the boy's journey to trust had been harder than Emma's. The fact that Jacob called him Pa at all was progress that both Ben and Lucinda celebrated privately. As the family moved into the yard to begin setting up their camp for the night, Lucinda felt Ben's arms slip around her waist from behind. Happy, he murmured in her ear. Lucinda leaned back against his solid strength. Complete, she corrected. Absolutely complete. Ben pressed a kiss to her temple. Remember when I found you in Jerome? How could I forget? The memory, once painful, had been transformed by time and love into something else, the beginning of their story, the first chapter of this life they had built together. I knew even then, Ben confessed. Something in my heart recognized you even before I knew your name. Lucinda turned in his arms to face him, and I was too scared to trust what I felt, she remembered, but you were patient, you gave me time. I would have waited forever for you, Ben said simply. A cry from Rebecca, demanding attention, broke the moment. Lucinda smiled and kissed Ben quickly before going to tend to their youngest. Later that night, with the children finally asleep in the tent pitched in the yard, Lucinda and Ben sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. Lewis says the cattle are doing well this year, Ben remarked. We might be able to add to the north pasture like we've been discussing. Lucinda nodded. Over the years, she had become as much a partner in the ranch's business as in their marriage. Her head for figures had proven invaluable, and many of the improvements to Copper Creek had been her ideas. And Emma's teacher says she's ready for more advanced studies, Lucinda added. She's talking about becoming a doctor someday, Ben smiled proudly. She's got the mind for it, and the determination. Like her father, Lucinda said softly. Ben's eyes met hers full of love. They both knew she wasn't referring to Malcolm. I think sometimes about that day in Jerome, Lucinda said, voicing the thought that had been in her mind earlier. How close we came to never having this, if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't spoken up. Ben took her hand, his thumb brushing over the gold band he had placed there 5 years ago. But I was there, he reminded her, and I did speak up. And everything that happened afterward, he gestured to the tent where their children slept, to the thriving ranch around them, to the life they had built together, all of it was meant to be. Lucinda leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing over her like a tide. I think you're right, she agreed. All of it was meant to be. From the tent came the soft sound of Rebecca's fussing, followed by Emma's gentle voice soothing her back to sleep. Ben and Lucinda exchanged smiles, the wordless communication of parents who share both the challenges and the joys of raising children. Overhead, a shooting star blazed across the sky, bright and swift. Make a wish, Ben whispered, echoing Emma's words from that long-ago Christmas. Lucinda closed her eyes briefly, then opened them to gaze at the man beside her, the man who had saved her in every way a person can be saved, the man who continued to show her every day what love truly meant. I already have everything I could wish for, she told him. Ben's answering smile was like the sunrise, full of promise, full of hope, full of tomorrows yet to be lived together. And in that moment, under the vast Arizona sky with the past behind them and the future stretching out like an open road, Lucinda knew with absolute certainty that some stories do have happy endings after all.